I mean, part of the problem is we don't know if this is going to be adopted, if it's going to die, if it's going to be amended, and then, you know, go back to the House. I mean, who knows exactly what's going to happen to this? But if the Senate picked it up and rammed it through and the governor signed it next week, people will be knocking on the door.
And I think at that point you'd have to amend the ordinance because there's even terminology in this act that's not consistent with your ordinance.
There is terminology. They call it a, yeah, they call it a provision center, but I think
we try to be similar
it's the
between
same
Michigan
thing.
law and our ordinance.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, my opinion is at the end of the day, if you said we don't really want to touch this, you're not going to be any problem. I mean, we can call it a dispensary and then call it something else. And if someone comes and says, I want to have a dispensary, I mean, we say you have to follow the act. So my recommendation is, if you think you want to think about it, why don't I have give Nikki language for a moratorium that she can publish for a public hearing next month, so you can have a public hearing on the moratorium. You can talk about what you want to do with this. If you let it die, you let it die. It's not a public hearing to amend the ordinance. It's just a public hearing to go forward with the moratorium. Because if we put that off because of, or better, as it's inconvenient for you, but my opinion that we have to do that as a zoning ordinance. If you put it off a month, you're putting everything off a month. You're putting that moratorium off for a month, and you could end up regretting it. That's
so you're saying put a public hearing to consider a moratorium?
Yeah, public hearing on a moratorium. I mean, because it's literally a moratorium against adopting or approving any land use permits or other special use permits or site plans for medical marijuana dispensaries for 180 days. Or whatever days you want. You have a public hearing. If the public comes out and says, no, leave it alone, or yeah, you know, we want to make sure you can get an idea, and then you can recommend approval of the township board. Township board will presumably approve a moratorium as a zoning amendment, and then you can start talking about what needs to be changed here.
So actually, the earliest moratorium to go on would be March, is that right?
The earliest moratorium can be adopted at the end of the day. If you had a public hearing next month, yeah, it would be at the.
It would be the
March board meeting.
March board meeting to adopt it. Yeah, I mean that's why I'm saying if you think you want to do it, let's move the ball forward. You can always stop it from rolling, but you can't. You know, wherever you started from, it's at least 2 months to get it through.
So we would either be looking to just shelve this right now, or look for a motion to set a public hearing on a moratorium for
against medical marijuana dispensaries, site plans, land use permits, and approvals for whatever days they think is appropriate. Again, we don't. This could sit in the House or in the Senate for 6 months. I don't know what's
having a public hearing on a proposed ordinance doesn't mean you're enacting it.
Yeah.
It doesn't even mean that the board, planning commission is agreeing to enact it. We're holding a public hearing to garner,
Get the opinion of
get a public input. And then you can close the public hearing. If you don't want to do anything, you don't do anything.
No one shows up, no one cares, either way.
Can I ask a question about this?
Yeah.
These dispensaries have to be 1,000 feet away from a school, a park, a church,
The library.
library,
School.
and it has to be in a commercial district,
Business, it's zoned
business
for,
district?
Yeah, they're allowed in.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is it seems like if you look around Acme, how much area does that leave for somebody to pop up one of these things? Is there, we don't have a lot of buildings sitting vacant that are.
They need to be talking to Steve Smith.
There's going to be some room from 1,000. Yeah, you probably could put 2 in there.
Well, right, but I don't.
You put one on one end and one on the other.
I mean, really, yeah, you're right, Dan. I mean,
Careful,
a lot of them around.
You
there.
start figuring out where you're going to do this. I think it's a tempest in a teapot here, maybe.
Well, it may be. Like I said, there isn't. Sharon did do in 2011 a map showing where the existing ones were and where 1,000 feet from those things would be, and Nikki could redo one. And if you look at it next month, you say, "Oh, we don't have to worry about this." Then we'll just let it die too.
I
We can do that.
wanted to voice that.
No, that's a good point. I mean, that's part of the reason why the 1,000 foot was put in there, is to say we don't want one every third storefront.
All right, and now you look at the park that runs all the way along US 31 here. I mean, holy cow, that kind of wipes out that whole area.
Yeah,
You got church and school over here, and you got these little box things that people trade books in. Does that count as a library?
no, library, we actually did define library, that'd be an interesting, they'll be popping up everywhere.
Okay,
I just
So-
want to let you know real quick where they are not allowed. They're not
Probably
in
be
DNS.
under
Anyway, well, you can look at the zoning book and see, I don't see them B1S.
Here, you want a farm market?
Well, you know what, I mean, that was another question, right to Farm Act, whether right to Farm Act was started.
I like white farm ash.
you're not supposed to be growing it.
Oh,
You-
I thought we were
Doug.
talking about the one
You-
farm.
Somebody's gotta grow it.
That's the big question is, where does it come from?
Cherry orchard.
Well, that's
obviously.
part of what this does.
Underneath cherry trees.
Oh, I would have offered you,
I saw that.
B2,
anybody peppermint?
maybe only B2.
Mama?
That's a no.
I can't search, I don't, why am I?
Thank you.
It's at least, I see it in B2. But
While they're trying to do
Anyway,
their ordinance,
what I'll do, I'll bring back some more information, a bigger analysis, so at the public hearing and after the public hearing, you
if
can
we
have
were
a
to
better
have one.
understanding, if you vote to do that, you can have a better understanding of where you stand, what this is, where you're at now, and what could be.
You feel there's some parts in there.
But who know, again, that's what, kind of what I mean. We don't know what the Senate's gonna do. So if it dies, then we're doing all this for kind of no reason.
I hate to waste our time.
But on the other hand, again, if it passes quickly, you will have people knocking on the door.
But even if people
So-
are knocking on the door, they still have, well, unless it's a right by use.
You just have to get a special use permit. It's by special use permit. Yeah, my opinion's always been, if someone comes in and presents an application, they aren't subject to a moratorium. So if they have an application for one in ahead of time, you are prevented from stopping it. That application gets processed regardless of whether you adopt a moratorium. So.
Okay, speaking of not spending too much time
So,
on
yeah,
this.
sorry.
At this point, basically, if anyone would like to make a motion, we'll entertain that. If not, we're gonna be moving on.
I'll make that motion.
Doug, say the whole motion.
You want me to
Just
do
like
the
Doug said.
whole motion? To entertain to look at having a moratorium on,
Just set a
Including a
public
public
hearing
hearing.
public hearing for.
for special use permits, applications, and land use permits, right? For medical marijuana dispensaries. Would anybody like to second that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay. Mr. Rosa. We're gonna give, Mr. a minute here. Let's do a roll call vote.
Just like you write on the name. White,
Yes.
Tibbins, yes. Wenzel,
Yes.
Ranga,
Yes.
Demarche,
Yes.
Rosa,
Yes?
Bourget,
Yes.
and Finch.
Yes.
Great, motion carries. So we will,
Set up for public hearing, I'll make you do it.
all right,
For February,
we are now gonna move to old business. form-based code.
I can handle that.
It's John's turn.
I just gave you, I handed out a copy just for your records that shows the changes that were made from, as a result of the meeting that we had last month. One was we reformatted it to get rid of the placemaking map, and we made a modification to the regulatory plan to include the commercial parcels across the street that we had previously omitted. And we didn't change anything else because we weren't directed to by the PC. And my suggestion is, even before we move this into a public hearing, that the planning commission refer it over to the county planning department, let them review and comment on it, and see what kind of comments they come back with before you entertain a formal public hearing on it. And actually, that's the recommendation I'm gonna have too for the ag ordinance is move them over to the county planning department. Planning commission, let them review and comment, send their comments back, so we have some additional feedback, and then you can decide if you want to schedule a public hearing on it or not. If you're so comfortable with that, doing it that way.
That was short. Okay, does anybody have questions of the form-based code? They've thought about it more, came up with ideas, reconsidered things? We wouldn't formally need to make a motion. We would
You need to make a motion to,
recommend to the board to send it to?
no, you, the planning commission does. That you would
Make
You
a
would make a
motion to
motion.
submit it to county planning.
submit it to county planning for their review and comment.
Yeah, I'll make that motion, refer this form-based code to the county planning department for review and comments. I'll support it.
Who supported it?
Tree,
Thank you.
Mr. Forget, trying to get out of using last names. Fancy, right? Yep, we're gonna catch up. Any discussion? We're gonna catch up on minute taking.
Yeah, I like it, I'm glad we're going this way and it's part of it, so.
Have you reviewed it? And you're comfortable?
You
Yeah.
haven't reviewed the consistency yet.
Oh, I did, I actually was working on that, yeah, and I haven't found really anything, I've got a couple notes for John on little things, but nothing of any like substance, so.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is gonna be the what ifs. Trying to sit around and think about what ifs.
Yeah, and
Okay.
those are some, at the end of the day, they,
Yeah, you can't.
there's always something.
Yep. We have enterprising people in here. with all kinds of things. Okay. Don't jinx me. You like that. All right, are you ready? All right, all in favor of sending the form-based code to county planning for review and comment, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Sending that on.
The next ordinance is the ag ordinance, which you had in your packet. I was not in attendance at the meeting last week because of the weather, but I think Carly, you were there. And Nikki.
Mr. Rosa and I
Mr.
both
Rosa?
attended.
Okay.
We had 6 members of the ag community, I would say.
Yeah,
6, 7.
yeah, maybe more.
We had a pretty fair turnout. I
I can
thought it was a
mention
lot of people that are kind of heavily involved in that community here, so it was a good turnout as far as who the key players were at the table. We basically sat down and kind of reviewed some things line by line.
That's what I heard.
The biggest items were, we did a little bit of kind of clearing up a few things that didn't make sense, like how you could have horses on 5 acres, but you had to have 10 acres to have a goat. And I think we set all of that to 5 acres. That was one of the bigger things that came out of talking about that. The other thing that we got to was the wineries and small winemakers, small distiller, and microbrewery as a use permitted by right. And the ag community recommended that we say 50% of the bulk ingredients need to be from Acme Township.
I've got that, those, all those changes.
Yep,
I went over
all
with
those
Nikki.
changes. Originally, we were looking at trying to make the geography more Michigan, but the consensus or the push from the ag community was make it specifically Acme. And then a similar thing with the special use permits.
Can we entertain questions on this? now or
Yeah, so
not?
I think that we can open it to questions
yeah,
that we
sure.
have. I know I have one that I would like addressed, so
I do.
take it away.
One question that I had was, and I understand the reason for the 50% bulk ingredients coming from Acme, but in the case of, say, a microbrew, is anybody growing hops or any of the ingredients that would be part of a microbrew process?
There are hops being grown here. Up on Angel Road, there's someone. I don't know to the extent of how much hops.
But that's a
production.
relatively small
Bulk, yeah. It
part
would-
of the process. So
I
I'm talking
mean,
about the
your-
grains.
Your grain bill would greatly outweigh your
Correct.
hop schedule.
But I'm just asking the question, because I don't know if there's anybody in the township that is creating grain for food.
At this point, we don't believe there's anybody who's growing either grains for the beer or grains to still, or potatoes or sugar beets. What are all the things you can like still and make pretty much anything, the sugar, right?
No sugar.
To our knowledge, there's not anyone doing that, but I can't say that with certainty. It's more of to allow someone to have a different model of agricultural production, I would say, in the future. Someone comes in, like terra firma in Garfield Township, there's a place that they would exist in the zoning ordinance then. If they want to shoot for 50% of their grain bill to come from their area or someone that they contract here.
But not even terra firma has 50% of the product being local right now. And so how would a microbrew even start up?
Well, that was a question that was discussed, especially considering the investment in grapes. To put in an acre of grapes, they estimated it to be somewhere around $12,000 to $15,000 an acre in cost just to plant it. And then you're waiting 3 years until you have any production.
3 to 5, yeah.
Yeah, so that was my comment also, was
3 to 5, no, you can have grapes before that.
enough grapes to harvest and make wine? Because Ken was saying 3 years.
Yeah, it's where Ken's in pretty much full production right now. And he's been 3 years.
Oh.
Because you should have grapes within the second year.
There you go, 2 years, okay. Well, still, if you're starting a company and you put all your money in.
Oh, I
and you
agree,
leave it for
but
2 years.
on this going with Tracer, they got, what is it here? 10 acres for a winemaker.
Mhm.
By the time you put in your winery, your parking facility, for your tasting room and everything, you're down to, what, maybe an acre that you can, so I guess I look at the size for acreage, there isn't.
So I can tell you that where that came from,
I know I didn't make the meeting of.
yeah, no, that's fine. Luckily, I was there and Dan was there, so Mr. Rosa was there, so we can fill you in. I don't know exactly where the genesis of the idea of 10 acres was. I think that was in a previous discussion that we were talking about, not just a 5 acre, you need to have 10 acres. And then we had, I believe, 5 acres was the minimum that needed to be in production on the land. And was it 4?
No, they changed that down to 2 acres.
Right, it was the urging of the ag community that we reduce that, because I think Ken only has,
They said you can get a lot of wine off of
I
2
think
acres.
Ken
a lot of
has
grapes.
3 or 4 acres and that's
Ken
it.
has, I'd say close to 5. where he's at, up on that. He's right next to
Well,
me.
he's telling you different things than he's telling us.
I could be off on,
Because didn't he say he had, I don't think it was any more than 3 or 4.
I don't remember if he said what he had, but he said, I know he said that 2 acres would provide an adequate amount of juice to make a decent amount of wine.
Yeah.
And this is a small winemaker, this isn't the next
I'm
step
looking,
up,
I'm looking
right?
at your
Right.
winery, or,
There's another step up
The
from a small
winemaker.
winemaker.
The
yeah, that's,
larger one,
it's a larger one, the winemaker.
that would be by special use permit. A winemaker, the one that's by special use permit, would be something bigger than, Chateau Grand Traverse or Peninsula Cellars. What are the 2 that are so big?
Chateau Chantel out there?
Oh, not in production. I think it's Chateau Grand Traverse and Leelanau Cellars. It's the 2 that distribute to,
Oh, okay.
here, the store we're not supposed to talk about. And, they're all over the state. They buy from everyone on the peninsula and manufacture in mass quantity. So those would be the ones that are the special use permit. But pretty much everything else in our region right now would fall under the small wine maker.
But do we have any other winemakers, or I mean, other than Ken, do we have any other vineyards?
Any other
Not
vineyards
presently.
in Acme Township? No, okay.
Because if the winemaker has to have 50%, but we only have Ken Engel that he can buy from with 5 acres, and he's a big enough distributor
Well,
that's gonna be doing very large stores.
There's a guy on Angel Road,
And they have their
and
application
he's putting in
in, or,
10 acres, I think.
yeah, it's that property that went through foreclosure and then it was auctioned and then it was,
I know it is Jack
It's the
Nelson's
White House.
property.
yeah, and they've already
started on
They've already
making
came in and
the
talked,
winery.
but are they making the winery there, or are they just planting grapes?
I think they're planning on having the winery there, is what I've been told.
Yeah, you're right, Tom.
Is it?
Yeah, they're gonna
Let me
try to
give
put the winery in, but they might not now with, it'll be tough with 50%.
Let me give you some data. This came from, this is from some of the universities that do the wine stuff. 1 acre of vineyard can produce up to 2 to 10 tons of grapes depending on yield. And then at the meeting I was at before this last one, the guys that were familiar with wine said that
If it's 10 tons of the
if
acre,
it's 10 tons,
you're not getting good
you're
wine.
not getting good wine. So, okay, so, but one acre is 2 to 10, okay, okay. So 1 ton of grapes results in a little bit more than 2 barrels of wine, and each barrel contains 25 cases of wine. Okay, so 1 ton of grapes, okay,
It's 50 cases of wine.
equals, we'll do 50 cases of wine,
And a case of wine is 6 or 12?
12.
12.
Or that, basically, 1 ton of grapes, each barrel contains 60 gallons or 300 bottles. So
So
you have
it's
2 barrels,
600
it'd be 600 bottles of wine per ton. So if you do 3 tons, you're looking at 1,800 bottles of wine, okay? You do 4, you're looking, you just multiply it, you're doing 2,400 bottles. That's a small winemaker. Now, the state considers a small winemaker up to 50,000 gallons. Okay, so each barrel contains 60 gallons. So 1 ton of grapes gives you 120 gallons. And the state allows you to go, a small winemaker by the state is up to 50,000 gallons. So, I mean, it's a lot of production.
So there's actually probably no plausible way you could have a winery, the special use permit one,
50%.
because if 50% of 50,000 gallons, so you have to be producing 25,000 gallons of wine from grapes grown exclusively in Acme Township. And I would argue, Doug, I don't know, tell me if I'm wrong, but that we don't have that much land that's suitable for growing grapes.
Not really, on this side of the bay.
I would argue that there is. Because if you wanna take, well, my property that sits right next to Ken's, he's trying to talk me into growing mine. And he'd like to, you know, there's 80 acres right there. And if you come up here on 31 and you look at Allsford property and all up through there, I think that would make.
Close to the waterfront, with
Close.
slopes, yeah.
It's got some nice slope in that. And then,
So it's plausible.
it's plausible.
Yeah, 80 acres,
You'd have to be the kingpin of acme.
80 acres will generate 9,600 gallons at 2 tons per acre. Okay. 80 acres will generate 9,600 gallons. That's 2 tons, so that's like real, you know, and then if you go high ton, I mean the 10 tons, and I agree with Doug, they say if you get 10 tons, you're getting,
We'll just do 5.
You know, you're gonna make jelly
Do
out of
the number, 5.
5, 5 is gonna give you half of that amount, you're gonna do 24,000 gallons out of 80 acres.
If a winemaker's looking at coming here, they're gonna have to convince the farmers to grow the grapes in order to get the 50%.
Correct.
And then you're gonna have to wait 3 to 5 years
Right.
for that to produce, and they're not gonna wanna do that.
That's never gonna happen.
Well, you know, we did an extensive feasibility study for the property down the road. It has, 160 some acres. And part of that is the cedar forest where the creek goes through. Then the rest of it we looked at. And out of that, maybe a fifth of that would be suitable for growing. And only of that, only a small 1 to 2 acres was found suitable for a high-end vinifera grape, which would be on the top of the ridge. So out of all that land, not very much was suitable for it, even though it was a sloping terrain. And then everywhere we went to down south and over Minnesota, the university there, every place we went to said 3 to 5 years.
Terry,
The only place I find those now is gas
I've
corn.
been telling a lot of people.
I haven't seen those changes. All right, we're gonna bring this back. In keeping with something I said I would do a while ago, does anybody want to comment on this from the public? We said that if we had a small enough meeting, we would allow people to make comments. Because sometimes people are sitting there dying in the audience with a comment. What is it?
Well, I don't know much about the wineries, but you know, it makes no difference where you put a small distillery, on ag, commercial, wherever. It's still gonna cost the same amount in capital. And no matter where you put it, you're still gonna have all the licensing from the state, the federal people, maybe even the county. So I think, I know a little bit about distilleries, but I would think if you leave the ordinance this way, where it has to be 50% produced in an area, you'll get 0 people ever investing in a small distillery.
It's a lot of risk for the investors.
Yeah, right.
Good point.
There's just a little point, there's a real nice small distillery in Lake Leelanau called Northern Latitudes. It's a real fun place. They attract a lot of people during the summer.
You know.
And that fellow has about $1.5 million invested in that. You could go over there and see what, you know, in the distillery business, what $1.5 million gets you.
Field trip.
There you go.
I've been there.
But final point.
Okay.
That it would be very hard for somebody to come in to Acme to invest the capital that would take to build. I'm sure wineries now are the same. They're inspected by the feds, by the state. So you have to have certain codes to bring those up. It's just not, you don't have a copper pot sitting in the back doing that. You really are regulated. The gentleman across the street here, believe it or not, he's got over $1.5 million invested in the back. Some of you've been over there to go through it, but that gives you some idea of how much you need to invest, so.
Okay. Are there any other comments? All right, we're gonna bring it
I made a brief comment that I forwarded, which was that regarding these percentages,
Yeah.
there might be some long-term goals on the percentage, that in 20 years, we would want a certain percentage of acme grade content in a wine, you know, versus the 5 or 10 year horizon. That would be a sliding thing.
Good. My last comment on that is how do we know? Yeah. We need things that are enforceable. We've talked about this before. I think saying like, hey guys, is 50% of that acme grapes?
How does the federal government do it with locales like Old Mission Peninsula?
That's a John question.
And maybe that would be a model to follow.
Those there, if I'm not mistaken, are governed, they'll take and inspect it and take samples of the wine, and they'll know right where the grapes are from.
From isotope some things or something.
Yeah,
Like that.
I don't know how to do it, but they can,
Yes, they could
they'll
taste
take the
this
wine
one.
and, take it and inspect it. If it doesn't meet inspection,
So we're not gonna be doing that. Nikki has no idea how to do
I-
that, nor will she ever. So it's something else to keep in mind when you're thinking about this, because I think that where we're getting is we're not settled on that yet as a commission, potentially.
You
And
know-
I don't know if anybody here is ready to say what they strongly believe it should be.
I kind of think that we should send it to the planning commission like he suggested.
county
or
planning?
The county planning commission
Okay.
and get their recommendation on percentages or regional or acme. Because maybe it's 10% acme and 40-50% regional,
see,
if we want to do a percentage.
if you want to do percentage.
I think that's a great
But I think
idea.
when
You
you
wanna
get-
make that motion?
So Doug was saying.
When you get down to a small distiller or microbrewery, I'm like Trey. I think around the township here, and there's only one grain farmer that I know of, and I don't believe that he,
Sends,
Sense, yeah.
Sends are making, some of their spring wheat goes to Grand Traverse Distillery. From what I understand, Grand Traverse Distillery has contracted what they produce for about the next 4 years.
'cause I know.
And they're buying the grain before it's even planted or whatever, on the assumption that they're gonna get so much.
Because I know
So-
we had a couple of pieces of property, we had 80 acres that we tried to talk to Shorts there, and they had no interest in buying any of the grain, so we
The,
didn't.
the
put it
difference
in.
there is
But-
probably because they don't have the capacity to malt it. We talked about this at the ag meeting. You have to be able to malt the barley or the grain, any kind of grain for beer making. And the closest maltery, place that malted stuff, I don't know what that facility is called, is in Wisconsin. So
But
even if
that
you
could be-
grew local grain, you'd have to ship it to Wisconsin unless you had the ability
So
to.
at that point, when you're talking about your distillery is in the microbrewery, maybe you could put that down to 5% or 2%.
You know, and the issue,
Because
Madam
we don't
Chair,
have it.
Yes,
I think when we started this whole discussion of changing the ordinance came up to reduce the size of the acreage to allow smaller winemakers opportunity to have a vineyard, and I really don't know where the percentages came in, other than the fact that people were looking at what is going on in Old Mission and their percentage requirements, but like I cautioned the planning commission, their percentage requirements are because they have a special federal designation. From a planning perspective, we should just be concerned about the size of the acreage and how much is planted. I don't even know if we really should be concerned about what percentage of the product is really township grown, because the question I have all the time is, how are we gonna enforce that or even manage that? How's the township gonna manage that?
that's my huge opinion.
It's one of those unfunded mandates that everybody talks about, and this is an unfunded mandate. They're gonna ask the township board to have somebody go out and inspect to see that 50% of the fruits are grown in Acme Township. Then the question I have is, what if they find it's 47%? Are they gonna call up Jeff then and tell Jeff to have an injunction to stop them from producing their wine for the season? I mean, you know,
Another option is, I mean, it could all, we have those permitted by right, and it sounds like this is just a suggestion. It sounds like with these things that produce booze, we're playing out the every scenario thing, and to me, that would scream that it should be a special use permit, so that it can be reviewed by the planning commission. Does that make sense? Because if all of these are going to be unique and someone wants to do something but it doesn't fit somewhere, or maybe if they don't have 50% coming, you still have that unfunded mandate. But maybe if they want to be a little bit different, they could be a special use permit and still be allowed.
It has, is that why it says uses permitted by special use permit has the exact same language?
Those are for the bigger
the
operations.
bigger operations are by special use because of the amount of traffic they may generate and other traffic.
So the winemaker is not a small winemaker, it's a grown-up winemaker, and it's not a small distillery or a micro
It's 10
brewery.
acres and it's the same 50%.
There's no modifier at the beginning.
Right, but it's the same
Right.
acreage and it's the same 50%.
Right.
I mean, this doesn't make any sense to me.
I'm recommending to the PC, I don't know where, I wasn't here for the 50, I would have argued against it. Planning Commission should be more concerned about the size of the operation and how much is planted. And the 50%, whatever that percentage is, the township's not gonna be able to enforce it.
I agree with you totally.
Today,
You can't enforce
So
it.
do I.
By
Why are we
chance,
talking
we
this
found
today?
50% of
Because
the
we're the planning commission.
Know the bulk ingredients used in the production.
But if you can't enforce it, you
Because, I
can't
mean,
enforce it. and there's nothing
I
to-
keep,
Okay,
I keep looking at 50% and I think that's wrong.
I agree.
And,
Why
but
do you
I
think
look,
it's
I
wrong?
look at the property size
What are you
and I think it's too small.
talking?
That's where I'm at.
50%.
Beth, where are you at?
I think it seems like it shouldn't be as much as 50%. They should, I don't know, I want Dad to think about it. He said, when I asked the original question, and he said I would have to think about it. I said, what would it take in order to make somebody to come in and be able to grow their own grapes to make a distillery and be prosperous? He said I would have to think about it. I would like him to think about it, because I need more information to make an informed decision.
Mr. Forget.
I don't think it's enforceable with the percentage, and I think you're basically squashing any startup that whoever potentially wants to start with that type of designation.
Mr. Rosa?
I'd be inclined to go along with what John said about the acreage situation. You can clearly see how many acres they have, what's going on there. And I'll go back to what I said earlier about, allowing the startups to buy their raw materials wherever they need to early on to survive, and then gradually wean off of that, rely on what they grow.
Okay. Mr. DeMarsh?
To me, the issue was we were defining small wineries, small distilleries, and micros. And what was asked of us is to reduce the acreage size to make sense, and I think that's all we need to look at.
Mr. Farragut?
I'd say look at the acreage and percentage and get this over to the county for review at the same time.
Okay, I'll be looking for a motion in just a minute, so.
I agree with everything that Bill said.
Okay. Very agreeable. Mr. White?
Well, I guess I've come down to the acreage percentage. I just don't. I look at the acreage as to what they would have, not just in the crops that they're growing. I know with the microbreweries, when it comes to growing hops around here, try to find one that's growing some good hops. There's only one that I know about in Leelanau County.
The Empire.
That's
But
got,
even still, those hops don't compete on what they can import, the volume that they have to
right,
use.
there's one grower out there in Leelanau County, and I can't, his name, I
Is
can't
the one
think of
out on
it.
72 right before Empire?
No.
No,
Is it
it's very bad.
It's out in Leelanau County there,
There's like a,
and
yeah,
he's growing hops that'll compare with anybody in the United States. But he's one guy, and I know that everybody's trying to find out what he's doing, and he's not giving up any information. Don't blame him. I think we might just as well send this to the county, see what they think on it, bring it back, and that'll give us time to think on what we want to put in there for acreage, and if we want to do percentage, if we want to do a 5% or 10%, which I think that would be very doable.
If we send it to the county, can we ask for their recommendation on that part?
For them to specifically consider something?
Yeah. Like we specifically would like help on.
I think they've done.
You could, I mean, that doesn't mean they're,
They're gonna be right either, right?
yeah.
No, but it's just their opinion to look at another angle of it.
Can I just do one more devil's advocate scenario, and then we'll look for a motion, and that is, if we don't, what? You have a question?
I have some questions on this too, but
Oh, you
after
go
this
ahead.
discussion.
Well, my question would be, if we don't have any, or we have a, let's say we went extreme to the one end and got rid of the percentages, then we don't really have it subject to, it wouldn't be subject really to a site plan review. So you could have someone come in, plant 2 acres of stuff, and put in a Chateau Chantal that takes up 10 acres. With like just 2 little acres on the side of some Concord grapes growing that they say they use for wine. And I think that's where all these numbers started coming from. So then how, there's no clear answer as to how to make sure we're preserving the rural and agricultural character of the community, but also allowing for some of this agricultural entrepreneurship. Question away.
It's wholly unrelated to percentages and acreage, is that okay?
Oh, good, because I think we should stop talking about it. It's 8:30.
Okay. Then I'll change the subject. 6.11.2A4, agricultural processing activities which are not major agricultural processing. I don't know what that is.
There's 2 periods there too.
Page, it's 6, it's the second page, and it's the 4 on the second page. And that gives me pause, because what is not a major agricultural processing activity, and what is a major agricultural processing activity, and how does Nikki know when someone's applying for this if they're major or not?
I would say that, I'd have to go back and look at how many, this thing's been edited to death. I would say that paragraph should read, activities which involve a variety of operations after harvest of crops to prepare them for market, that which are not major that should come out. It should be activities which involve a variety of operations after harvest of crops to prepare them, such as, cleaning, milling, pulping, drying, roasting, storing, packing, selling, that kind of stuff.
I don't have any issue with having a limitation if it's a not SUP if it's used by right. Just that that was too vague for me to be comfortable. So whatever the planning commission thinks, if they like your recommendation, that's fine with me.
I think that's what it's trying to get at.
Then it's just any, which is, yeah.
Does everybody understand the question? Beth, if you read number 4 on page 2, it's basically a typo that makes absolutely no sense. Agricultural processing, activities which are not major agricultural processing.
Yeah, it should be activities which involve a variety of operations, and then you can put that paragraph.
activities
So
which
just take that
involve.
whole sentence out, because the rest of that says a variety of operations after harvest.
Yep, that's what it's for.
Yep.
The intent
Right.
is to allow agricultural processing facilities.
So just take out are not major architectural processing.
Except for don't try to process it and turn it into alcohol.
Right. We'll just take that out.
Yeah, so just
Yep.
take that out. Thank you.
Other questions?
Um,
I'm glad to
That-
know you're here and reading, by the way, Mr. Jackson.
oh yeah, I read them. 10, the next page, 10, value added farm product. And I mentioned this one, I don't think I had a meeting, but it says value added farm product, any product processed by a producer from a farm product. So my first question is this is really production of value added farm products, right? Because a value-added farm product is not a use. I mean, I don't apply for a value-added farm product, I apply for a facility to
Processing.
produce value-added farm products.
Which would be like a community.
Well, it could be, I mean, it could be my own facility
Oh,
where
yeah.
I'm producing
Okay.
something. But then the next question, so that's the first part of this, and the second part is, it says any product processed by a producer from a farm product, but, I mean, I don't know, are smoked in canned fish farm, I mean, I don't know where you, maybe I guess they would be if you're doing aqua culture, so, okay. All right, okay. So, I mean, I think that one then just needs to have the name changed to sort of value-added farm
Do we ever try to put these in order that makes sense?
product production
Because doesn't it seem
sometimes
like that would be like
adjacent to something else.
adjacent to agricultural processing? Because it's a very similar. Just throwing that out there.
Value-added farm product.
What? I
I
think it should be number 5. It makes a lot more.
Is that what you said?
It's
Jeff?
gonna be like
Processing.
production facilities for value-added farm products or something like that.
There we go. Questions? Any others? Good.
You answered my question on riding horses, I noticed that was removed.
Because,
Yeah, you answered it, I'm fine.
Yep.
I'm more pointing that out after I read it. And then the last one was, retail greenhouses you removed? Was there a reason for
we
that?
did. Was
Special
that an
use,
accident?
under the old ordinance, 611.3, greenhouses and nurseries selling at retail on the premises are allowed.
611.
6.11 dot, well, see, it's the old one. In the current ordinance, 6.11
Okay, so I'm
dot
just trying to
3,
see where you're
sub C is greenhouses and nurseries selling at
And
retail.
now it's riding stables and livestock auctioneers.
Yeah, and there is no greenhouses and nurseries selling
I
at
don't think
retail.
that was the intent of, to remove that. I never remember having a conversation about that.
Again, I don't,
It
I
didn't
only
get
pointed out because I
moved.
noticed it was a distinction. And if you don't like them.
I'm just asking, did it get moved?
I didn't
to
see it.
6.1,
I searched for
11.2?
greenhouses. Yeah, I searched for greenhouses in the document, and I didn't find greenhouses anywhere else in the document.
Yes, I think that that's just an error. Someone probably hit a delete at the wrong, thank you. Wow.
So, sure.
My head hurts just from thinking about it.
I don't have to do this. This is the easy part, though.
Is that all?
Yeah, that's all I found.
All right, are there any other questions on the agricultural? Yes.
One more thing that was mentioned at the meeting the other day, brought up by one of the farmers. I'm just throwing this out there, a devil's advocate type of thing. This person asked, there's a provision for single-family detached dwellings on page 3 at the bottom, under B1. And that person asked, what if I wanted to build a duplex? You know, maybe sell off my farm and build a duplex on one 5-acre parcel, live in one half, rent the other half, let the other guy pay my utility bills and taxes.
And I think that came from the fact that somewhere, under 6.11.3, number letter Q, there is a provision for conversion of a single-family dwelling to a duplex. And he said, well, why can't I just build it as a duplex instead of build it as a single-family home, apply for an SUP, and convert it to a duplex? I made the argument that we have a multi-housing neighborhood, which is where that type of commercial enterprise happens.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yep. But it is known that someone expressed a burning desire to build a duplex in the ag district. The final thing that did come up, and this was, I just want some clarification from council on this, is there was a question about, I have a 2-acre non-conforming parcel in the ag district that I've owned for a while. I've kind of had horses every once in a while, because no one ever really says anything. And then I sell my property. Does the person who purchases my property have the right to have horses or not? Because technically they don't have 5 acres.
It depends on the facts of the current or previous owner's use. I mean, if technically it's only non-conforming, so suppose that was my lot and I've owned it for the last 25 years. If I had horses on that lot and was using it to have horses prior to enactment of the ordinance that prohibited that use, then I would be a non-conforming use that could continue in perpetuity unless I abandon that use. But that's the fact scenario where that's certain. When you asked the question, I don't know enough about how long the horses were there. I mean, if the guy just put horses on there last year and no one said anything, then the answer is he's not a non-conforming use. The answer is that he's a use that the zoning administrator hasn't figured out is violative of the zoning ordinance yet.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? I mean, it depends on
Remember
how,
when we were talking about this?
how and how long.
And I think that everybody left kind of not really knowing the answer.
Right.
And thinking about, this specifically was relating to livestock on these smaller parcels in the ag district that do exist.
If they've been doing it for a long time, technically they're only non-conforming if they did it before the zoning ordinance prohibited it.
Right.
But there's a question that gets raised when someone does something for such a long period of time, are they, is it something you really want to enforce? Although technically you can always enforce it, always. So if they've been doing it for 15 years and you adopted the zoning ordinance 16 years ago that prohibited it, we could go out there and stop them if you really wanted.
Just asking. I think that there was maybe some.
All right, so the use basically goes with the property.
Yes. Now, so if I've established a non-conforming use and I sell it to someone else, oh yeah, it goes on. I can sell that non-conforming
Any
use and
kind
they
of
can continue.
non-conforming use. Having horses, being something in a district you're not supposed to be,
Yeah.
everything.
Yes.
That'd be similar to like if you had
I
a
believe we got
3-acre
the wrong
piece
answer.
and you sold it to somebody
If
else.
we were
it's
looking at the
non-conforming.
owner,
Yeah.
it ended with the owner.
Okay, I would figure it.
Yes.
Hmm.
That's weird.
Why?
But
You were doing something that went against our ordinance? Just
no,
be- just-
what Jeff was saying is if somebody was doing, had 2 acres and they had horses on it, and they did that before the effective date of the ordinance was adopted, it would be non-conforming. If after this was adopted and they started putting horses on 2 acres and it wasn't enforced by the township, the lack of, because it wasn't enforced doesn't create the non-conforming use. Like Jeff said, technically the township could say, you're not in you're in violation of the ordinance.
At
Here's a-
any time.
Here's a classic example. Okay, so there's a gas station on the corner that's been there since 1940. You designate that district residential. Gas stations aren't allowed in residential districts, but that gas station is there and they can still operate, they can sell to anybody they want because they were in existence prior to your creation of your ordinance. If they built that gas station after you designated it residential, they'd never be able to do that because it's such an obvious use. But if they did, even if they've been doing it for 15 years, you could shut them down still.
Or the
Very
person they sold to.
or the person they sold.
Okay, I thought
But
you were
then-
saying the other,
But then,
that if they were already doing it even, and then they sold their property to somebody else, if they were doing something not in the ordinance, they sold their property
Mhm.
to somebody else that was not gonna do the ordinance, then they could continue to do it
Yes.
as well.
they can.
It depends on the date of when, say you have horses. I got my horse in 2000. If I got my horse in 2000 and an ordinance prohibiting me from having horses came in effect in 2001, I'm fine, I'm a non-conforming use. If I got my horses in 2000, right after the board adopted something in 99, so the year before I got my horses, that said I can no longer have horses on my 2-acre parcel,
Full rank on you.
I am violating the ordinance for
Right.
as long as I have horses. Even if Nikki never came out there, knocked on the door and told me to take my horses somewhere else, the person who buys my property next is also technically violating the ordinance.
Right.
That needs to be clarified with some people. All right,
Obviously.
what are we doing with this? Agricultural, I'd look for a motion.
Somebody said we could make one over here. But
I'll make a motion to send it on to the county. and
There we go.
And I'll second that.
revisions suggested by the.
With the revisions that,
Okay. Could we bullet point those?
I will. All the revisions?
Okay, revision.
Revisions are
Edit,
under number 4, agricultural processing. We're gonna change that paragraph to remove the words "which are not major agricultural processing."
if we can just get, yeah,
Okay.
Which are not.
you can just put what numbers they are.
Just
So,
number, we're gonna make revisions to section 611.2,
4 and 10.
and 10,
And we would like
to add, we'd like to add greenhouses in.
to add greenhouses to 6.11.2 or 3? 3.
Well, they were a
In three
special use
before.
permit before.
They were in special use.
In which one, 6 point?
6.11.3, add greenhouses.
Carolyn,
Yes?
are there things that they're looking at, like on that 6.11.21, well, the paragraph where it talks about raising and keeping small animals, goats,
Oh,
has that goats been scratched out of there? Okay,
yeah.
okay, so some of the things that we talked about at that meeting have been,
Yes. they
All
have-
of those, yeah,
Okay.
all of those edits should have
Okay.
been made.
okay.
I just thought greenhouses.
Yeah, greenhouses is in A1, but that's not a retail, that's
That's not
ag
a
use.
retail.
Right, I looked at that.
So we're specifically saying retail
Yeah, because the ordinance said before,
greenhouses. Okay,
retail's a nursery, or greenhouses and nurseries for
retail,
Retail something,
nursery,
yeah.
greenhouses.
yeah.
Okay, just so you know which one.
Yeah, those I imagined were greenhouses that.
Yeah,
someone
like you have a
was,
few costs in the back
yeah.
to start your,
Yeah, figured.
okay.
We don't need roll call, do we?
No, I don't, I hope so. Good Lord. We have a motion on the table, is there any discussion? Other discussion? Okay, all in favor of, sending the agricultural ordinance with the amendments recommended by legal to the county planning commission, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no.
It's called-
Okay,
It's called fast.
very good discussion. I feel smarter for having come here today. At this time, I'm gonna open it for public comment. You guys have all, patiently been just staring at us for a good hour and 45 minutes. Anything?
I have just a very quick one. I sat through a lot of those meetings over that marijuana ordinance and it took up an inordinate amount of time for the planning commission, and I hope you don't go back there again.
Noted. We hope we don't either. Seriously, I remember I came on to the planning commission right after you guys were done with that, and it was like the big elephant in the room. Like, if anyone brought up marijuana, everyone was like, we're not talking about it again, are we? Oh, boy. Then it was the ag ordinance, the Garvey barn. That was the next one after that. Oh, yeah. All right. Any other public comment? Yes.
Yes, I do. I'm Brian Kelly. I moved to Acme about 30 years ago, and I've recently taken an interest in local government.
Oh.
I'm trying to come up to speed on a lot of the documents, planning documents, park planning, all of those things. And I heard a comment earlier in this meeting, which was no one shows, no one cares. And I'm struggling getting access to these documents. I found that the versions of the Acme planning documents that are online are outdated. Not only are they outdated, but they're missing important pages. And I had great difficulty. I was in fact unable to retrieve a complete current version of that document. And I've actually tried for a couple months. I've been trying to follow this document. I finally obtained a copy in printed form from the township supervisor. I asked at that time both to Mr. Zollinger and to Nikki for an electronic copy that I could edit, mark up, give feedback on. I still don't have one, and it's been a couple weeks now. I hate to think that I have to FOIA this document.
No, there's, if you go to acmefuture.org,
Yes.
the most current version of the master plan was uploaded today.
Oh, wonderful. And it's not a scan, it's an electronic
It's
editable.
a PDF.
Good, wonderful.
Is that what you're talking about, is the master plan?
That's one example, and I've got a couple more, actually.
Okay,
So the missing pages are a big problem too, because, this is like an 80-page document, and most of the versions that have been circulated to the public are about 36 or 39 pages. There are major, really important pages that have been omitted.
This is the complete document.
Yeah, good.
the other just,
You may want to just add, I
caveat.
think the reason why some of those were omitted, because it was in draft form,
Correct.
and the PDF was of what size due to the graphics? It was like really.
The
I have both versions with graphics and without.
Yeah, and the one
But those still
the one
were missing
uploaded
pages.
today is 44 meg.
Okay.
this is still talking about the master plan, correct?
Yes.
In no way am I making excuses. You can talk to me after the meeting and we'll make sure we get a list of what you're looking for and get it to you. I apologize you haven't gotten it. One issue we're having right now is we're like waiting with bated breath for a new website.
I know that, and that's and I
And
wish
it should not be an excuse. I agree.
It's not your fault. I know you guys don't deal with this, but that is so overdue that we have this smattering of different websites, and it's very confusing, and nobody would know which of these websites to go to. And this is not a complex website. These are PDFs that get put up for consumption, and it's not rocket science. Should have been done months ago.
Right. If you'll give me a list after the meeting, we'll
Okay,
get it to you. And you said your name is Brian Kelly?
Yep. And another one is the park plan. I went to the Acme Planning today, and I downloaded the park plan, and it still says we're building a splash pad, which I understood at the meeting a month or so ago that, no, there's no splash pad here. We're not building a splash pad. But the version that's up there right now, that was dated like 12/4/2013, still says we're building a splash pad.
Okay. Marcy or Steve would know more than we would where we are in draft.
Those online. I didn't.
Those are going to be up online because Mr. Zollinger was provided a CD with the final adopted plan on it. I talked to Jay today, and he anticipates having a new website up and running next week. And he's in the process now of putting up all of the formally adopted PDFs. We're the ones that have prepared a lot of them, so he's been working with our office to get the adopted version of the PDFs.
Or the current draft.
Or the current draft.
In some cases.
Yeah.
Because the master plan is out for its 68-day review period.
There are a lot, and the other policy is, since we're talking about it, is that things do not get posted on the web that have not been reviewed by the planning commission. So parts of the documents that we see maybe holes in them is because they're working on that part, and once they approve it for public review, then it gets uploaded.
Right.
Okay. But the current draft of the master plan, as of today, was uploaded at noon. So go on acmefuture.org,
Sure.
and you'll find that one.
Okay.
And Mr. Zollinger does have the current PDF of the rec master plan.
You know, and my concern about that delay in providing those documents to the public is that these are very complicated documents. It takes a long time to wade through them if you have any seriousness about them. And if you don't get your input in early in the planning phase, it's not going to be considered. If you show up at the final meeting and try and get something in there, it's not going to happen. You know, you need to get those in early. So the idea that we're not going to release these to the public because we're not really settled on them yet, I don't think that really works.
Well, that's
Particularly when
that's
we're
a-
having special meetings
Yeah,
with,
Madam Chair, I'll
Yeah,
direct
sorry.
my questions through you. That's a procedure that's used by many municipalities in terms of the working documents are at the committee level, and once the committee is like, okay, we're cool with this, then they get uploaded immediately for public review because they're still working on it. And one of the reasons why is just what you said is you go to the website and you find bits and pieces of the documents with missing holes in them. And we're trying not to do that. We're trying to give the community the most up-to-date information as it's being produced.
and the challenge is, if I come to a meeting here and listen to you discuss this document and talk about page 76, I don't even have that, and I, you know, was not able to print it out before I came to the meeting, so you're really out of the loop if you're trying to participate in all these documents.
Okay.
Yep.
We'll try to improve. I guess I hadn't really realized, because we don't procedurally handle any of this, because I have a full-time job.
I understand
So-
this is administrative stuff, and I don't want to
Yeah,
follow
so
that.
just give me your, is this the list of
This was
what?
from the meeting of the last planning commission, and that was a letter that a community member, a builder, had written. There are a
Yes.
couple, those came out really blurry. I let Jay know about those, and I see that for some reason in the meeting minutes, they weren't real readable and legible.
Ours weren't real
Yeah,
legible
ours were
Yeah.
not, they were
Okay.
not of really great quality either.
Okay, I
It
don't
was
know
kind
what
of a
happened.
lighter, I'm sure we can round up one of the documents for you to take a look at, or,
I have a copy. They got me a great electronic, a great hard copy of the plant master plan, so I have that.
okay.
Let's
Let's talk after the meeting, but I would hope that with the new website and some of this is gonna be a little bit better. Because I've also noticed that Mr. DeMarsh is not even listed as a planning commission member on the website, which is a joke.
The old one?
And I am still, and
Yeah.
I am still the housing and community seat, and I've been the chair for 7, 8
Well,
months now.
They're not, I mean, I can't speak for Jay, but
Mhm.
Jay asked me to take a look at the new website, and like any community, they're putting more emphasis on getting the new one up and running than trying to
Right.
update the old one.
And I understand,
So
but
there's
we're
that
running into issues
issues,
with
we are.
the lack of having the old one touched, it seems like, in a very long time.
So
So-
I had a quick question, a couple other things. The agricultural plan, I was breezing through that document the night before the meeting, and I sort of was shocked that it sort of looked like, and I could be mistaken here, that trailer parks are farming?
Or what?
Farming? Trailer parks are farming? That
Yes.
we're gonna have high-density manufactured homes and that's farming?
You,
Are we growing those in Acme, or?
I thought we put them in for Margaret Hobby.
Yeah, and
Where
I
are we
think
gonna,
that,
I mean,
Now, let me ask, I saw a bullet item in there that was for the workers of farms, and that makes sense to me, but then I thought there was a different section that looked more like general, non-farm related housing. What was that related?
Manufactured housing is located.
the manufactured housing